On Tisha B'Av night, Jewish people gather in shuls across the world to sit on the floor and lament the destruction of Yerushalayim, to lament the banishment of the Jewish people from their land, and to commemorate the events of the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash. And sitting on the floor with the lights dimmed, to some extent consoled by the camaraderie of our communities, we read the words of Yirmiyahu Hanavi. Yirmiyahu Hanavi, who composed the most eloquent expression of lamentations in the entire corpus of Tanakh. Yirmiyahu Hanavi, who served for 40 years, trying to reach the hearts and souls of the Jewish people, to inspire them, to change their outlook, to alter their behavior, and to ultimately discover their potential in reigniting the spark and the connection between them and HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And yet, after 40 years of rebuke, and after 40 years of predictions, Yirmiyahu lives to see the city of Yerushalayim destroyed, the Beis HaMikdash burned. And in the first chapter of Eicha, in the first parak of Eicha, he depicts that destruction from the perspective of Yerushalayim itself, giving a voice to the city, to the buildings, to the streets, to the temple itself, in what it meant to experience such a sense of destruction and devastation. In the second parak of Eicha, Yirmiyahu focuses not necessarily on the resulting destruction itself, but rather on the process of the destruction, on what it meant to stand and see HaKadosh Baruch Hu unleash this sense of din, this sense of justice, this sense of retribution for the alienation that had taken hold between him and his people. And when it comes to the third parak of Eicha, a major transition takes place. In the third parak of Eicha, which in certain ways is the most emotional parak of Eicha, is where Yirmiyahu begins to personalize the experience, where Yirmiyahu looks into the eyes of the Jewish people and he says, Ani HaGever, looking into the eyes of the Jewish people throughout Jewish history, and Yirmiyahu says to each and every one of us, I am a witness. I am not just relating to you something that has been passed down in the world of Jewish history. I am not giving you memories here. I am relating to you things that I saw, things that I experienced. I am a witness and I am a survivor. And Yirmiyahu begins to lament what it meant to him as a person, as a leader of the Jewish people and as a member of the Am, to experience the trauma and to experience the destruction that took place in those awful years. And in the course of relating those words, the Gemara in Shabbos and Daf Chaf Hei Amud Beis relates a very peculiar interpretation of some of the most poignant words of Yirmiyahu Hanavi in relating that sense of dissonance that he felt between himself and HaKadosh Baruch Hu in living through those horrific experiences. The Gemara tells us, Vatiznach mishalom nafshi nashisi tova, that my soul despaired from having any sort of shalom, any sort of peace. Nashisi tova, that I have forgotten, I have forsaken what it means to have goodness permeate my life. One would expect that the Gemara would interpret these words to refer to some of the most extraordinary aspects of the devastation and void that was left in its wake in terms of the experience of Churban Abayis, but the Gemara does not do so. The Gemara says the following: what does it mean, Vatiznach mishalom nafshi? Amar Ravivo zu hadlokas ner b'Shabbos. That this in fact refers to the kindling of the Shabbos candles, of the serenity that would take hold in the homes of the residents of Yerushalayim in Eretz Yisrael, in anticipating a normal welcoming of Shabbos Kodesh. Nashisi Tova, Amar Rav Yirmiyah, says Rav Yirmiyah, this refers to Beis HaMerchatz, the opportunity that people would have to go out into the street and find themselves a place where they can relax, where they can bathe themselves in comfort. Amar Rav Yochanan zu rechitzas yadayim v'raglayim bechamin, a place where an individual could find the opportunity to just wash themselves in the most hygienic of context, their hands and their feet. Rav Yitzchak Navcha Amar Zumita Noah, that this refers to a comfortable bed, to be able to just end a difficult day in the municipality of Yerushalayim, a challenging day of school, of work, and retire to a comfortable sleep. V'kelim noim aleha, and sheets and blankets that could adorn that bed. Rav Ava Omar Zumita Motzas Ve'isha Mekushetes L'Talmidei Chachamim. This refers to the opportunity of the Torah scholars to establish homes of dignity, to establish homes of beauty, to cultivate relationships with their wives that are permeated by shalom, by peace, and by growth. And the question on this Gemara is, if this is Yirmiyahu expressing the depths of his soul, the pain of Ani HaGever, the witness, the survivor, all of the destruction and devastation, all of the death and pain and suffering that he witnessed, why is it that the Gemara seems to interpret these expressions in such a mundane and trivial manner? That Yirmiyahu was preoccupied with a nice bed to sleep in? That Yirmiyahu's, the greatest element of Yerushalayim that Yirmiyahu would miss would be the bathhouses? That Yirmiyahu would reflect on people's opportunity for their marriages to thrive under the most ideal of circumstances? That these would be the elements of life that Yirmiyahu is going to miss as a result of the outcome of the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash? What does the Gemara mean? So the truth is, if we take a step back, we can recognize that when tragedy strikes, whether it's a national tragedy, a communal tragedy, or even an individual tragedy, there are always two dimensions. One leaves a levaya with a sense of the loss and the trauma and the suffering of the orphan and the widow. One looks at a terrorist attack and sees the horrible footage, the pictures, the horrific circumstances that these events sometimes take place. One reflects on some of the wars that Am Yisrael has had to fight, and one can tell the unbelievable and unparalleled challenges of the soldiers and their families in terms of the horrific events that ultimately shape those experiences. There's the extraordinary loss, the trauma, the depth, the pain. But the truth is that months after the Levaya and years subsequent to the terrorist attack and decades after the wars that have been fought, there are lingering elements of loss that in certain ways have much deeper trauma. And that is the manner in which normal life has been altered forever. That when people confront challenges and suffering, that there is the extraordinary element of the challenge and suffering itself, and then there is the lingering impact on the way in which that suffering and challenge will affect the normalcy of their life forever. And so says Yirmiyahu, you know what? The destruction of the Beis HaMikdash, the events of Tisha B'Av, they are unparalleled in Jewish history. To witness the burning of the Mikdash Hashem, to witness the destruction of the walls of Yerushalayim, to watch the Jewish people exiled into Bavel, and in the next generation, in the next Churban, to the world beyond. Yes, these are extraordinary circumstances. These are unbelievable traumas, but writes Yirmiyahu that, you know what, there's another layer to the way this impacts the Jewish people. And that is the way that their daily life will never be the same. That their Shabbos will never be the same Shabbos. That they are going to sleep at night, and the peace that they try to attain in settling down, it will never have that sense of serenity. That the ability to enjoy oneself and indulge in the luxuries of life will never have the same resonance as it did before. That there's a new normal to life. A normal that has been completely recalibrated by the destruction of Yerushalayim and the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash. And the truth is that when we think about how we relate to Tisha B'Av itself, it's sometimes very, very difficult to connect to what it means to have lost a Mikdash. it's sometimes very, very challenging for us to be able to recognize and appreciate what it means that we have that void of something that we've never been able to relate to before in the first place. But when we look around our lives, and when we look around our communities, and we reflect on our families, we find so many incidents and so many examples and so many life experiences where the gullus of the Jewish people is manifest. When we look at some of the challenges facing our community that elude us, that elude almost even the most greatest of our leaders and the greatest minds of the generation, when we look at the degree to which we are trying to grasp unity and spirituality and inspiration, and to harness the assimilation that is taking place amongst our youth, and we are reaching out and trying to grab on and hold on to these elements of our community, the challenges of just creating a normal, frum life, to be able to afford and appreciate and be inspired by what it means to embrace HaKadosh Baruch Hu and Torah as our central values and ideals of life. When we see how those challenges permeate our daily living, we begin to recognize another layer to the Churban bias that Yirmiyahu was prophetically embedding in his deepest and greatest and most poignant call to the trauma of the Churban. And so the truth is, when we sit today on Tisha B'Av and we reflect on our own lives, we have to appreciate the elements of Galus that shape and characterize our daily living as well. But it's not just in relation to the world of the destruction that this becomes relevant. Because the truth is that we all know the famous story of Rabbi Akiva, that Rabbi Akiva was walking in the Makom HaMikdash, in the place of the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash, with a number of his colleagues, and they began to weep, seeing the foxes roam the desolation of the Makom HaMikdash, and Rabbi Akiva began to laugh, began to exhibit signs of simcha. And his colleagues turned to him and said, "What are you doing? Why are you so happy?" And Rabbi Akiva says, "Why are you so sad?" And they said, "Because this is a fulfillment of all of the admonishments of the Nevi'im. This is a place where people used to bring their karbanos, where the Kohen Gadol would stand in all his grandeur on the day of Yom HaKippurim, Mare Kohen, and look, it lies in desolation." Rabbi Akiva turns to them and says, "That is exactly why I am relating to this experience with a sense of elation. Because I see the world through aspiration, and I see the world through hope. And I recognize that if the prophecies of destruction are going to come true, then the prophecies of redemption will come true as well." But notes Rav Amital that the prophecy of redemption quoted by Rabbi Akiva is a striking example, because of all of the prophecies that Rabbi Akiva could have quoted, ones that depict great grandeur in the restitution of Yerushalayim and the Beis HaMikdash and Klal Yisrael, Rabbi Akiva chooses a nevuah of Zechariah, Od yeshvu zikenim v'zikenos berchovos Yerushalayim. You know our greatest ambition, you know our greatest hope, you know our greatest aspiration is not just to see the great Beis HaMikdash and not just to experience the messianic revolution that Mashiach will bring. The greatest depiction of Geula is the ability to walk down the streets of Yerushalayim and to see an old man and an old woman sitting on a bench in safety, in security, in shalom, in peace, with a sense of achdus, with a sense of unity, with a sense of confidence, and with a sense of appreciation for what it means to be part of Klal Yisrael. Our greatest hope and our greatest aspiration is for normalcy. That's Geula. Geula is not just the Beis HaMikdash falling from the sky in a ball of fire. Geula is the normality that returns to our religious life when HaKadosh Baruch Hu becomes manifest in the framework of everything we do. And so this Tisha B'Av, as we focus not only on Galus and not only on Geula, but on what could bridge our world of destruction and redemption. How we could bring a sense of unity, how we could counter the sinas chinam that gripped our community, resulting in its destruction and continues to grip our community. Let's not just think about the great big plans we could do to bring the Jewish people together. Let's not only focus on great and grandiose gatherings. Let's recognize that in those small individual steps that we can take to bring a sense of simcha to someone's life, that when someone's in trouble and when someone's suffering, it's not just about paying all of their medical bills, as important as that is, but driving a carpool, or cooking a meal, or just making a phone call, or just bringing a smile to their day. That is also part of the trauma. That is also part of addressing the ani hagever. That is also part of confronting what it means to be a witness and a survivor. That is part of addressing what it means to lose everything. That it's not just in the extraordinary moments, but it's in the return to normality that we will find our ultimate good.